Hello and welcome to the first ever NFL Rough Draft podcast. I'm Mike Lushane and I'm here with my partner in crime, Ray Mencio. And how's it going, Ray?
Good, Mike. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. We're getting close to the draft. It's an exciting time of the year. And, we have so many rankings on our site and our mock drafts and everything. And, there's a lot of stuff on there. But still, we wanted a chance to be able to talk about, how we view some of these prospects a little bit more in depth. And so we're trying a podcast. We're going to see how this goes. And tonight we're going to talk about some of the top quarterbacks in the draft because, anybody that's been following it lately can see that, where these guys are going to go and how good they're going to be is a pretty hot topic right now. So, Ray, why don't you start us off here? You think any of these quarterbacks in this draft are elite prospects that have a chance to develop into, top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. When back in December, I had said that if Andrew Luck wasn't a part of the 2011 NFL draft, that we weren't going to see any elite quarterbacks. And in my opinion, that really hasn't changed. Pretty much all the draft pundits have told us over the past couple of months, particularly over the last couple of weeks, how Cam Newton and Blaine Gabbert are going to be top 10 selections in the draft. But to be honest with you, I just think that there's too many question marks with both those guys and with everybody else in the draft. And I think that when you're talking about an elite quarterback, you're not really talking about that many question marks, and I just don't see it with either Newton or Gabbert. How about yourself?
I completely agree with you. I mean, we've talked about this all year long, and we both agree that when you're drafting a quarterback in the top 10, it's not an exact science. You're never completely sure that you're drafting the next Peyton Manning, of course. But, if you need a quarterback, if you're, the Cardinals sitting there at 5 or the 49ers sitting there at 7, you can't take Blaine Gabbert or Cam Newton just because they're the best quarterback on the board. You have to be convinced they're going to be able to develop into top 10 quarterback in the league, because if they don't, it's really a wasted pick. I mean, it's not to say that I think right. It's not to say that we think that these guys are all going to be busts. That's not what we're saying at all. But at the end of the day, look at the Carolina Panthers. They drafted Kerry Collins at, I think it was 5, back with their first draft pick, actually. He wasn't a bust. The guy's been playing for 15 years. He's 11th in NFL history in passing yardage. But at the end of the day, he's not going to get the job done. He's a mediocre starting quarterback, and those guys end up getting replaced. So I don't think that any of these guys in this draft are elite quarterbacks, and I'm with you. If Andrew Luck was in this class, he's the number 1 overall pick. He's an elite prospect. It's a no-brainer, but he's not. So I wouldn't draft a quarterback, first overall. I mean, would you, if you're the Panthers, what are you doing? Are you taking Cam Newton or Blaine Gabbert at 1 overall?
Yeah, I have this scary feeling that they might end up taking Newton overall, and that seems to what we've heard. But if I were running the Panthers, there's no way. Yeah, there's no way I could take Newton or Gabbert. First of all, Jimmy Clausen was their second-round pick last year, and they traded their second-round pick this year for what amounted to Armani Edwards, which hopefully then ends up being something more than what he showed in his rookie year. But Jimmy Clausen, just like everybody else, all these quarterbacks had growing pains. Now, I didn't see a lot in Jimmy Clausen last year, but I think that if you're the Panthers, you got to give him more than one season, and then he didn't even start for the full year. And, just like, any other quarterback, he's going to have his bumps and bruises, and you got to go with the best player available who you see when you're picking number one, because you have a ton of holes in a bunch of other places. I don't. They have too many holes on defense. Steve Smith isn't what he used to be. Their running game wasn't what it was 2 years ago. I mean, the only place I wouldn't take anybody at this point would be the offensive line, and but that's about it. I think that they could take Patrick Peterson, Marcel Darius. I don't know what why they're even thinking about taking Cam Newton at this point.
Right, and at the end of the day, are Cam Newton or Blaine Gabbert really better prospects than Jimmy Clausen was a year ago, at this time? And it's easy for people to look back and say, oh, they're absolutely better prospects than he was back then. But it's just, I'm not convinced that's the case. And you can't take a guy, I mean, especially Marty Herney was their general manager last year. Does he want to say that, look, we wasted our second-round draft pick last year, and I'm willing to admit that 1 year in, and we're going to take a quarterback, we're going to take Cam Newton with the first overall pick, and this lockout could go until July or August. If that's the case, Cam Newton's not going to have that time in between minicamp and training camp and then a full training camp to get ready. He's not impacting your team in 2011. And who's to say that Jimmy Clausen doesn't start in 2000? Well, I was just going to say, who's to say that Jimmy Clausen doesn't start in 2011 and show signs of improvement?
And
I didn't need to cut you off there.
No, that's all right. So, 16 months ago, we were talking about Jimmy Clausen being a first-round pick, potentially being a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, and no one would have thought back in January of 2010 that Jimmy Clausen would have fallen out of the first round. And, again, Clausen is a guy who had some question marks, and we saw his stock fall. I just think that these quarterbacks are getting overrated at this point, particularly the second and third tier guys like the Lockers, Ponders, Mallets, Daltons, Kaepernicks of the world, because there's such a desire for a quarterback from a bunch of teams. And Jake Locker, has the intangibles. I like Jake Locker off the field. What he says, what he does, his makeup, his demeanor. He's a leader. He helped turn around a pretty poor college program at Washington where a couple of years ago they didn't win a game to, having a big bowl victory over Nebraska. Now, you look at the box score, and you don't see Jake Locker doing much in that game. It was actually statistically one of his worst performances in his career and one of the worst performances in bowl game victory history. But do you really want to take a guy like that who completes under 60% of his passes with a first-round pick? Because I certainly don't, because that stuff is proven that your completion percentage really doesn't get better in the NFL. I mean, I know people could pick out cases that happens, but it's rare. Most of the time you see your completion percentage go down from college to the NFL, rightfully so.
Right. And I just want to throw it out there that we actually never had Jake Locker as our top-rated quarterback even before this college season started. But, I'm with you. I'm with you on these secondary guys.
Saw all these issues that people are bringing up with Locker now have been there for the last two seasons.
Right.
And I think that what a lot of people saw were the intangibles and saying he's going to grow and mature as a quarterback, which on the field he really didn't do in 2010. He really didn't take that leap forward. So I don't know. I just can't use a first-round pick. And a guy like Colin Kaepernick, he has all the talent in the world. But he's raw. And you can't use a first-round. You can't use a first-round pick on a quarterback that you're going to take the next 2-3 years to mold. That's not going to happen, because you know what? If you're doing that, if you're the Dolphins at 15, you're going to be picking in the top 10 again next year, in the top 10 the year after that, if you're waiting for Colin Kaepernick to develop.